I know it. Everybody you ever trusted did you dirty. So now you don't trust nobody. You can't trust nobody. It's too risky and it ain't worth it. I know. But Pimpin' got good news. It's a better way, man. And in the words of Mac Dre, just a little bit of game is all it takes. So we gonna talk about it. Let's go.
Bitch, you want all this pimpin' you can't afford. Perform like a punk, but want a winner's reward. Some suckers give you points, but bitch, you never scored. If you ain't paying pimpin', then bitch, you getting ignored.
Okay.
I'm so sick of these.
I know everybody you know says don't trust no one. You can't trust anyone. Every post you see on social media says don't trust no one. Every song you listen to says don't trust no one. The TV shows that you watch, the movies that you watch, everywhere you look and everywhere you go and everything and everybody that you listen to says don't trust no one. So it seems like sound advice. And I know why you don't trust anyone, because you don't want to be violated. You don't want your trust violated, and you don't want to be hurt. It makes sense. I get it, right? But it's not a sensible thing to live life and not trust people. If you really think about it, just sit back and think to yourself, stop for a minute and think about what it's like to not trust anybody. That's heavy, right? Just, think about being on the run, right? There's a brother of mine by the name of Malik Wade. Shout out to Malik Wade, right? But Malik Wade wrote a book about when he was a fugitive. He was on the run for a lot of years. I want to say somewhere close to a decade he was on the run, right? And when you read the book and you talk and you listen to his journey on the run, and you think about his journey on the run as you read, one thing that's made very clear is that it was very heavy. It's a heavy burden to move around on the run, because in that situation, you definitely feel like you can't trust anyone, because any mistake, any wrong person that you trust for even a split second is going to compromise your run. And before you know it, you're going to be locked up, right? So that's the most vivid example I can think of not trusting anyone and how heavy it is, right? And do you know what Malik ended up doing was, slowly but surely, he just became more and more sloppy. But it's not because he wasn't smart. It's just because he got the burden of not trusting anyone became so heavy that he just couldn't carry it anymore. So slowly but surely, he started, leaving breadcrumbs in order to get himself caught up, right? So, again, that's a clear example of what it's like to not trust anyone. But even in a not so extreme sense, when you don't trust people, it's heavy and it slows you down, and it can lead to unwise decisions being made, right? So the thing is not to just not trust anyone. The thing is to be wise with your trust and learn how to be responsible with trust and learn how to position people to earn your trust. So how do you do that? How do you determine whether or not somebody is trustworthy? Because you've probably trusted somebody and said to yourself, you know what, okay, moving forward, I'm not going to fall for this. I'm not going to fall for that. I'm going to be better in this way, that way, or the third. And I'm going to be better at trusting people than you try it. And yet and still that person violates your trust. They let you down. And now you're back to the mindset of not trusting anybody, right? But fortunately for you, Freeze went through the hard part of learning how to trust people. And it's been effective for me. It works for me. Fortunately for you, you don't have to go through what I went through to learn what I had to learn the way that I learned it, right? So let's break down how you trust somebody. Number one, and this is in no particular order, But first, this person has to have a high self-esteem or a high sense of self-importance. Reason being is because this means that when their self-esteem is intact, they're secure in who they are as a person. And people who are secure in who they are as a person, their outlook on themselves and what they do is not affected in a negative way by you being around, by your presence, right? Now, on the other hand, when somebody got a low self-esteem, your presence might affect the way that they see themselves and the things that they do, right? And that'll reflect in their behavior. So, one form of that is jealousy. Jealousy tends to come from people with low self-esteem. So somebody with a low self-esteem could be jealous of you, and you can just about imagine how many different ways that can lead somebody to violate your trust, right? So self-esteem, or again, high sense of self-importance, is important. They have to have that about themselves, right? The next thing is self-discipline. Self-discipline, somebody who has a high self-discipline about themselves or a strong self-discipline about themselves, ultimately, that's a good indication that they're the master of themselves, meaning whatever they involve themselves in, whoever they come around, they're the master of themselves. It's not a situation where they're serving something that isn't serving them, right? In that case, they would be a slave to something that's not serving them. No, somebody with strong self-esteem, strong self-discipline, yeah, they're not being mastered by people and things. They're the master of themselves, right? So they have the strength to refrain from certain things and resist temptations that could compromise them or the people around them, right? So someone opposite of that, who has low self-discipline or no self-discipline, they're going to give in to temptations. And in a lot of cases, if they don't have any self-discipline when it comes to drugs and alcohol or, different pleasures, gambling, you can just imagine the strongest vices that people tend to have. Those kinds of people oftentimes can compromise your well-being, can compromise your freedom, can compromise your health, and oftentimes compromise all of those things with themselves. So, you can just about imagine the millions of different ways that somebody like that can violate your trust. Again, if you trust this person with your safety, but the temptation that they're faced with, they give into it, they can't resist it, and that means compromising your safety. In most cases, they're going to do that, right? And there goes your trust. Violated, down the drain. So self-discipline is important. Lastly, but not leastly, if that's a word, I don't know, excuse my pimping if it ain't, but lastly is ability to withstand pressure. Ability to withstand pressure is important because, this is why snitching is so cool. Because people can't withstand pressure. They can't handle any kind of pressure. This is why every time you look up, every time you watch the TV, you see all these different rappers catching cases. It's always somebody telling. You seeing different drug kingpins going down. It's always somebody telling, right? And then not just that, but in the legal side of things, beyond criminality, there's people who go into certain endeavors together and pressures come, and one person might be able to withstand the pressure, but the other person can't. And, businesses go bad, friendships go bad, all kinds of things can go bad when somebody can't handle pressure, right? And life is going to, present pressures to you no matter if you're rich or poor, you know, whatever walk of life you may lead, pressure comes. Pressure is a part of life. And unfortunately, a lot of people can't withstand pressure. But if you have somebody around you who can withstand pressure, you know that that's a trustworthy individual. Because, you know, if they're faced with a certain pressure and them giving into that pressure means compromising you in any kind of way, you know they're not going to give into it, then you know that's a trustworthy person, right? Again, that's why snitching is at an all-time high, right? Not just snitching, but, you know, just violating people in so many different ways because people can't handle pressure, right? So ability to withstand pressure is just as crucial as the others. So altogether, you have high self-discipline or high self-esteem or high sense of self-importance. You have high self-discipline, and you have ability to withstand pressure. So Freeze, how do you know that this works? How do you know that somebody who has these three things is trustworthy? Aren't there other things that you should look for? You know, how do you know that this works? Well, this is how I figured this out, right? As many of you know, long live Sinful to P. That was my brother from another mother. And Sinful and I were always tight. And there had been times throughout our brotherhood where we were cool with various different people, right? And a lot of these different people that we were very close with violated our trust in one way or another. And when it all boiled down, it would always be Sinful and myself in the end. When everybody else would fall off, when everybody else would betray myself or him or the both of us, it always ended up being he and I in the end, right? So going through several of these situations with bro made me really sit and analyze everything, made me analyze some of these people that we trusted who we shouldn't have trusted, and how we were able to trust them, and, you know, what made Sinful and myself remain so tight throughout all of this, right? How come he never violated my trust? How come I never violated his trust? So this is what I came up with, right? The self-esteem thing is so important because some of these individuals, they reveal themselves in one way or another, but Sinful and myself would ignore the red flags when it came to their self-esteem, right? They would make jokes about me. We'd be out campaigning and I'll be getting action probably from somebody that they wish they was getting action from but wasn't. And they would make jokes like, oh man, this nigga with the light skin and the light eyes and the waves and the muscles, man, he getting all the action, man. A dark skinned nigga like me, boy, I can't get no action around this brother, man, shit, damn. And, you know, it would be funny. We would laugh, but it was a lot of truth in what was being said, even through the humor. You know, at the time, I didn't have the ability to look past the humor and see what was true and what wasn't true. And what proved to be true in the long run is that, you know, this individual didn't have a high self-esteem. They, in fact, had a low self-esteem. They didn't have a strong sense of self-importance. And that's just one example of how they exposed the low self-esteem about themselves, right? You know, or when they, you know, the must be nice attitude, like, oh man, I see you over there doing your thing, man, must be nice. It's another way that people reveal low self-esteem. that some of these individuals who I'm talking about revealed their low self-esteem, right? Another one is the self-discipline. And this is something where Sinful and myself both thrived, right? But it had a lot to do with our upbringings, right? Like Sinful, he developed his self-esteem in holiness, right? Being saved when he was a youngster, the congregation that he came up in, there was structure, there was order, and high self-discipline, great examples of men with high self-discipline around him. So naturally that trickled down to him. And from an early age, Sinful had a high self-discipline about himself. That's why when he became a grown man and, his mother passed away, he got depressed. As he told a lot of y'all, he gained a lot of weight. But because he never lost that self-discipline was always with him, one day he just, I'm going to go 60 days, eat nothing but fruit and water. And he did that with no problem. And it wasn't a thing where he would try and fail. No, the first time he said that he was going to do that, he did it. And lost 60 something pounds, more than 60 pounds within 60 days of doing that. And because that went so well, he stepped it up a notch and said, you know what? Now I'm going to go 100 days with just fruit and water. Right? And he did it. No problem. What I took for granted, and I believe Sinful also took for granted, is that not everybody has that within them. Not everybody has that ability to just make their mind up to do something and then do it. Nope, not everybody has that kind of self-discipline, right? And then ability to withstand pressure. Many of you know the story of when he went to jail and he was facing 70 to life and he didn't buckle up under that pressure. That's one of the greatest examples of pressure that, somebody could face. I just talked about all the snitching that's going on, Snitching wasn't even an option for him. Never crossed his mind, never considered, right? So the same thing with myself. My early example of self-discipline as a child was my father. I seen him display high levels of self-discipline with himself, right? Just smoking cigarettes for years and then just quitting when he felt like it. Drinking alcohol for years and then just quitting when he felt like it, right? I saw him do this with a lot of things throughout my childhood. So, that naturally, him showing me by example naturally taught me to be that way, right? And then self-esteem, and what's Sinful, right? To get back to his self-esteem, he had a mother and a grandmother that loved him dearly, right? And that's the seed of where his self-esteem came from. And then it was just reaffirmed as he got older. He was talented. He was able to sing. He was an awesome preacher at an early age, awesome minister as a teenager. So, these things factored into his self-esteem. This is what made him know that he was important. This is what made him value himself, right? This is what let him know how important he was to others, right? By the Most High using him in that way. And then with myself, same thing. I had my mother and my father and a host of other family members. And that's where my seed of self-esteem came from. It came from knowing that my immediate family and even extended family loved me. And they made it clear that they loved me in my every interaction with them. And then when I got older, I was talented too. I got into the rapping, and rapping was my world. you when I was a teenager, you couldn't convince me that I wasn't the greatest rapper on the planet, right? And that reflected in my behavior and in my execution of the rap, and I gained a lot of respect and admiration from that around my community in Long Beach, where I'm from. You know, a lot of people know me now because I'm popular on the internet as Freeze the Pimp, but initially, if you talk to anybody that grew up with me or knew me as a kid or even as a young man, if you mention Freeze, they're going to be like, oh, Freeze the rap, right? But that's where my self-esteem comes from. And ability to withstand pressure, same similar thing. I wasn't facing 70 to life, but when I was a young man, I was facing decades in prison when I caught a case with two of my tight homeboys. And, you know, the thought of flipping on them didn't even cross my mind. Even when detectives is playing games and public pretenders is playing games like, yeah, you know, I talked to your friend's lawyer and they're saying that, you know, he's considering taking a deal and giving this information about you and this and that and the third. They try to play them games with all of us, but we was all had too much, you know, ability to withstand the pressure for that. None of us buckled to that pressure. None of the three of us, right? Fortunately. So that's just one example. But, you know, before I got in the game, when I was hustling and even within the game, young in the game, fresh in the game, I went through so many situations where I was leaking, didn't know where I was going to lay my head, didn't know how I was going to eat and shower today. But, you know, a lot of people will be crying in them kind of situations, but I was just able to maintain my composure and be so cool under that kind of pressure and still work and still be effective and do my thing under that kind of pressure. You know what I mean? Stay in a pimp's place, which is in the 304's face, and, you know, mash until I come up, right? So I'm at home when it comes to pressure, in the face of pressure. That's nothing to me, right? So these are the things that were tried and true when it came to Sinful in myself. And all of the people that violated our trust, you know, when the scandal hit the fan with Sinful to P, and a lot of people turned their back on them and went to the DMV for haters, you know, that scandal was like the DMV for haters, you know, where everybody went and got their hater license to hate on Sinful. You know, a lot of dudes that was cool with us went to that DMV and got their hater license and started hating on bro. But, you know, with me, it never crossed my mind, because the opinions of people and what they thought about bro didn't affect me. One, because I know I knew him better than they did, but that two, you know, I didn't care what they think. Like, these are people who, you know, I don't have to depend on. They don't have to depend on me. I'm not dealing with them on an intimate level. Like, why am I worried about what they think? Right? And I know this man. I understand his value. I understand what makes him important. I know his character. I know who he is and I know who he ain't. So, you know, but that whole experience is how I came to the conclusion of those three things that make somebody trustworthy. So hopefully you can take that and utilize it and become more responsible when it comes to positioning people to earn your trust, and not just squandering your trust and just handing it out like a Chinese food menu, and you know, positioning people to earn your trust accordingly, man. Let that marinate on your mind one time. Freezes it. Put some of this good old love in your body, like so. And of course, as always, long live the incomparable Sinful to P. We out. Dig this.
Yeah.
I been stroking relentless to get waves like this. I spoke into existence for her to pay like this. In the trenches on a day like this, traffic consistent, and so I have to insist that she relay my chips. It's a trap with her name on it and my game on it. Any forces coming against this game, shame on it. Standing on my pimpin' from day one and remain on it. It carried me through every terrain and I gained on it. Experience joy and pain on it, sustained on it.
But getting back to this game that I never left.
Baby, yeah, where you been?